Germany, late 1500s. A crowd gathers in the town square. Not in fear, but in anticipation. You're pushed forward, hands bound, heart racing. On a raised wooden platform stands a man dressed in clean, careful clothing. Calm. Focused. Almost detached. He doesn't shout. He doesn't threaten. He simply looks at you the way a craftsman studies his work. Because to him, this isn't cruelty. It's duty. And today, you are the task. Introduction. His name was Frantz Schmidt, one of the most famous executioners in European history. But unlike the monstrous figures we imagine, Schmidt was not a wild sadist. He was meticulous, educated, and deeply conflicted about his role. Over a career spanning decades in the city of Nuremberg, he carried out hundreds of executions and punishments, documenting each one in careful detail. His records, known as the Executioner's Diary, offer a rare, unsettling window into the justice system of medieval Europe. A world where punishment was not hidden, but performed. Public executions were meant to send a message. Justice had to be seen, had to be feared, and above all, it had to be precise. Because a clean execution was considered a sign of skill and honor. A mistake, hesitation, a missed strike, could turn the crowd against the executioner instantly. Frantz Schmidt lived in that tension. A man tasked with ending lives, while desperately trying to do it correctly. Frantz Schmidt did not choose this life. His story begins with his father, forced into the role of executioner after angering a powerful noble. In the Holy Roman Empire, that punishment didn't end with one man. It became a family profession, passed down like a curse. From childhood, Schmidt was trained for a job no one wanted to understand. He learned anatomy, blade control, and the discipline required to carry out sentences without hesitation. Not brutality, precision. Because in this world, a skilled executioner was respected, and a clumsy one was despised. By the time he was a teenager, the moment came. His first execution. A young thief. Public square. A crowd watching every movement. There was no room for fear. No space for doubt. One strike. That was the expectation. Clean. Final. Controlled. Schmidt later recorded the event in his diary with chilling simplicity. No emotion, no reflection, just the act, as if he were documenting a task completed. And that's what defined him. Over time, he became known not for cruelty, but for consistency. Authorities trusted him. Crowds recognized him. His reputation spread across Holy Roman Empire territories. But outside the scaffold, his life was very different. Executioners were social outcasts. They lived on the edge of towns, avoided by ordinary citizens, their profession seen as necessary, but deeply impure. So Schmidt lived between two worlds. In public, the hand of justice. In private, a man isolated from the very society he served. Frantz Schmidt's notoriety did not come from wild violence. Came from mastery. Every tool he used, every motion he performed, was deliberate. Axes were sharpened to perfection. Blades polished until they gleamed in sunlight. No movement wasted. Every swing measured for efficiency.
Médiévale Europe demandait de spectacle.
Executions were public, often crowded, and served as warnings. Schmidt understood that the eyes of the town were as much a part of the sentence as the condemned themselves. Hesitation was not allowed. Precision was everything. He documented each case meticulously. Timing, method, and outcome were recorded in the executioner's diary. Which condemned were resistant, which collapsed at the sight of the scaffold, which needed additional measures. To Schmidt, knowledge was safety, for the crowd, for the authorities, and for himself. The pressure was constant. A misstep could mean revolt, injury, or even death. And yet, he carried out executions with calm composure, often under the intense gaze of hundreds of spectators. Despite the efficiency, Schmidt's work was not without controversy. Some considered his methods excessively methodical, bordering on obsessive. Others feared him, whispering that he took a grim satisfaction in his skill. In truth, Schmidt was bound by two realities: the law and survival. Skill was both a shield and a curse. By perfecting the act, he ensured the town feared justice. By isolating himself from the populace, he survived it. Yet, behind every calculated strike was a man trapped by lineage, duty, and the relentless expectations of a society obsessed with punishment. Executioners in medieval Europe were respected, feared, and reviled all at once. Frantz Schmidt lived this duality every day. The public saw only the uniformed man on the scaffold, the authority of law, the inevitability of punishment. But behind closed doors, Schmidt carried the weight of every life he ended. Years of practice did not erase the knowledge of each death. Each swing, each precise motion, left a mark on his conscience. He lived isolated in the executioner's house, a small dwelling at the edge of town. Neighbors avoided him. Children were warned not to approach. The community needed his skill but feared it. Friendship and intimacy were nearly impossible. Over time, his meticulous nature became a coping mechanism. By recording every detail, time, method, outcome, he transformed terror into documentation, horror into order. It was a way to survive mentally in a profession no ordinary man could endure. Yet, even the most disciplined mind could not escape entirely. Historical records suggest Schmidt suffered insomnia, moments of anxiety, and the quiet gnawing of moral conflict. He performed acts of death with precision, but never without awareness. His isolation mirrored that of the condemned. While society feared his tools, he feared forgetting the humanity behind each life he ended. Schmidt's story reveals a paradox of medieval justice. Those who enforce the law can become its prisoners. Even in power, he was bound by duty, lineage, and expectation, trapped between fear, respect, and the human cost of his craft. Frantz Schmidt died in the early 17th century, leaving behind a reputation both feared and respected. Yet his legacy was not in fame or honor. It was in the system he exemplified, a society that demanded perfection in death while offering no compassion to those who carried it out. The scaffold, the block, the blade, they were symbols of order. But for the executioner, they were also chains. Schmidt's meticulous records endure as one of the few windows into the life of a professional executioner, a life defined by precision, isolation, and the constant balancing act between duty and survival. History remembers kings, battles, and laws, but rarely those who enforced the penalties. Executioners like Schmidt existed in a space between fear and necessity, performing acts that everyone condemned privately but depended on publicly. His work forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. Medieval justice was as much about control and spectacle as it was about law. And those who enforced it, though they wielded authority, were often trapped by it, their humanity constrained by societal expectation. Frantz Schmidt's story is a reminder that history is layered. The names we remember, the events we study, are only part of the picture. In the shadows, people like Schmidt lived lives of paradox. Respected for skill, isolated for role, and immortalized not for heroism, but for their intimate connection to the machinery of power and punishment. To study him is to study the human cost behind the law, the quiet, terrifying reality of life spent in service to death. Not all executions were equal. Some condemned were common thieves, others accused of heresy or political defiance. But a few cases haunted Frantz Schmidt more than the rest. Historical records describe moments when entire crowds gathered, not just to witness death, but to witness punishment as theater. Schmidt's precision made him the center of these spectacles. Every swing, every demonstration of control, reinforced the power of the law, and reminded the town of his skill. In particular, he was called upon for executions that demanded extraordinary care. Nobles who had broken trust, rebels who challenged authority, or criminals whose sentences were symbolic warnings. Failure was unthinkable. One misstep could ignite riot, anger rulers, or shatter the fragile trust between executioner and magistrate. Yet Schmidt's work went beyond the act itself. He studied human reactions, the subtle shifts in posture, the signs of panic or resignation, and used this knowledge to maintain control over the crowd and the condemned. His role required not just physical skill, but psychological insight, making him one of the most formidable executioners in Europe. But each calculated act carried a personal cost. Letters and diary entries suggest that Schmidt was deeply aware of the moral weight of his profession. Despite outward detachment, he recorded moments of hesitation, sorrow, and even admiration for those who faced death with courage. In the shadow of every block and scaffold, he existed as a man shaped by society's demands, both feared and trapped, executing justice while living constantly under its watchful eye. As years passed, Frantz Schmidt's reputation grew. Towns across the Holy Roman Empire whispered his name with equal parts awe and fear. Yet the prestige carried no peace. Executioners were outsiders by design. Schmidt lived on the fringes of society, neither fully accepted nor fully rejected. His home, modest and isolated, became both refuge and prison. Neighbors avoided him. Invitations to communal events were rare. And despite his skill, he could never escape the reminder that his life was tied to death. In the final years of his career, Schmidt faced the same tension that had defined him since youth, performing his role with precision and care while carrying the moral weight of hundreds of lives. Aging, he adapted, relying on apprentices to handle physically demanding executions, while he oversaw every detail with a meticulous eye. When he passed away, records note only his professional achievements, exact counts of executions, detailed notes in his diary, but little of the man himself. His legacy survived as a model of discipline, skill, and the paradox of power, a figure feared by the living, yet bound by law and duty, unable to join the society he served. Frantz Schmidt reminds us of the human cost of medieval justice. To understand him is to confront the shadowed side of law, a world where mastery and morality collided, and where the executioner, as much as the condemned, was a prisoner of the system. Even centuries later, his name evokes fascination, fear, and the unsettling truth that skill in the service of death can make one immortal in memory, yet isolated in life.